Welcome to the Barrier Breakdown, Disrupting Mental Health podcast, where we talk about the clinical and practical issues that face those working in the mental health industry.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Barrier Breakdown. My name is Erin Molyneux-Bailey, Chief Operating Officer at Cognitive Behavior Institute, and my co-host, Dr. Kevin Caridad, who is the CEO and owner at Cognitive Behavior Institute. This week, we are joined by Dr. Lina Begdache, who is an assistant professor in the Health and Wellness Studies Department at Binghamton University in New York. She received her PhD in cell and molecular biology with a neuroscience concentration from Binghamton University. She earned a master's degree in nutrition sciences from the University at Buffalo, New York, and is a registered dietitian nutritionist, a certified nutrition specialist scholar, a certified dietitian nutritionist, and a fellow of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Begdache. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about how you became interested in mental health?
Sure. Well, thank you first for having me. I think my interest started when I started my PhD, which is, like, as you said, it's in cell and molecular biology. And I did my training, my dissertation training in neuroscience. So I got to learn how the brain works at the cellular and molecular level. And at the same time, I was able to understand how this may be impacting brain health and brain function. So this is how I developed that interest in learning how the brain function is eventually leading to emotions and behaviors.
Very interesting. And what led you to wanting to research regarding diet and how that plays a part in mental health?
So actually, I started as a dietitian. My bachelor degree is in nutrition and dietetics, and then I switched to nutrition science for my master's degree. And then I decided to switch to biology. So combining all this knowledge, I was able to understand how nutrients can impact health and mostly brain health at the cellular and molecular level. And I was like trying to, so I started seeing the relationship between how food could impact brain chemistry and brain structure, and how this change in brain chemistry may impact mental health.
That's very interesting. And can you share a little bit with our listeners who are mostly clinicians, a little bit about how your findings relate to anxiety and depression? Can we hear a little bit about that?
So I do have observational research. I started with observational research. We need to establish proof of concept. So this observational research was trying to find relationship between dietary patterns, certain food groups, certain lifestyles, like we were looking at exercise and frequency of exercise, sleep, substance abuse. And we were also finding how this may be related to mental distress. We used a Kessler-6, which is like a scale, a validated scale, to assess mental distress, which is basically anxiety and depression. So we were trying to see what kind of relationship it exists between patterns of certain diets and or food groups with mental distress. And then we also have interventional studies where we're also looking at people who consume certain diets and how that impacted their mental health as well.
Can you speak to that? I think that's a really interesting area. There's so many different ways of eating that we've heard, from keto to Mediterranean kind of versus the not so healthy traditional American diet at times. Can you speak to that? What any information that you have or knowledge on about those ways of eating and its impact on individuals' mental health?
So basically, I can tell you that the Mediterranean diet is the best diet for mental health because it encompasses all the major food groups. It eliminates mostly the unhealthy food. So all studies, if you look at those studies, you'll find that there's strong relationship between eating Mediterranean style and mental health, having good mental well-being. The Western diet, which is basically eliminating some major food groups like fruits, vegetables, all these are packed with nutrients, whether vitamins, minerals, or even phytochemicals that could be, for example, antioxidants, flavonoids. All these have a great impact on brain function and brain health. So any diet that eliminates major food group is not good for our mental health. So when we talk about keto diet, and I'm sorry to say that, I know there are many followers that believe in it, and it does maybe help with weight loss, but it may not be helping with mental health.
Understood. Okay. And so, can you speak more about nutrition and advice clinicians can give to individuals? How should they, clinicians aren't going to be nutritionists, so most people aren't going to see a nutritionist. So what advice as therapists, as we talk to our clients, what should we assess for? What advice should we be giving to our clients?
Well, I think the first thing to look at is the diet. Are there patients consuming all the major macronutrients? Are they consuming them in a healthy ratio? Are they consuming all the healthy fats? Because we could be consuming fat, but not the healthy type. And the healthy fat would be a healthy ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 fats. We need omega-6, but we're overly consuming omega-6, and that may be promoting inflammation. Inflammation in the brain has been associated with mental distress or increased risk of mental health issues. We need omega-3 in our diet. Are we getting enough? Not all sources of fish that we consume is good source of omega-3. So I think there's a need to focus on the macronutrients. Carbohydrate, are we consuming enough between the simple and the complex? More of our carbohydrate consumption may be simple, which is not a good thing for our mental health. We need more of the complex. So I think studying the type of macronutrients, whether the patients are also getting their vitamins and minerals, and I would advise them to get them from food, not from supplements, because supplements are not well absorbed. They may be sometimes interacting with each other in a negative way. Food has more synergistic effect for absorption of nutrients. So I think that would be the first step, is to understand the diet of the patient. Next, exercise. Are the patient exercising? Exercising and mental health go hand in hand. So if people are not exercising, they may have some mental health issues, or those who are prone to mental health issues and not exercising may have more exacerbation of their symptom. Sleep is a big factor, because sleep is a reset button for our body and brain. We consume enzymes, we consume stores when we're awake, and we replenish everything when we're sleeping. Are we having a good night's sleep, good quality sleep? Because we could be sleeping for 8 hours, but not good quality sleep. We need to have a deep sleep in order to restore stores.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that as a mother of a small child and how that can be affecting your mental health. Can you speak to a little bit, is there anything specific that sticks out that you'd like to share about nutrition when it comes to men versus women? Is there anything, specific that you think could be helpful? Share.
Well, so my research has been looking at the age group and the gender difference, because imaging studies now, with the advancement in technology, imaging studies is showing that the brain morphology between young adults and mature adults. So young adults is like between 18 to mid to late 20s, and mature adults are 30 and older. And and I label them this way because the brain completes its maturity between mid-20s to late 20s. So the imaging studies have shown that there's morphological differences between young versus mature adults, and between men and women.
Okay, one quick question. Can you speak to morphology, what you mean by that?
It's more how the structures are interacting together.
Right.
So for example, women tend to have denser areas in the brain when we compare them to men, and they may have denser connectivity between brain regions, which explain why women tend to be multitasking. So when they have this difference in structure in certain areas, it means that they have or they need certain ingredients in their diet, because everything in us is actually comes from what we eat. So if we're lacking the ingredients needed to support structures, eventually these structures are going to fail over time. So based on my research, I found that women tend to need a whole spectrum of nutrients. And we found that mostly eating a Mediterranean diet for women was associated with mental well-being. Whereas with men, we found that men could be partially eating a healthy diet and still not suffer from or not experience mental distress as much as women do.
Makes sense. Awesome. Now, any other differences, whether it be gender or ethnicity, that you think nutrition is important to be aware of?
We didn't look into ethnicity, but we looked mostly into men and women, young adults and mature adults. So for younger adults, we found that eating a high quality protein associated with a better mental health. And that's because their brain is still maturing. So it makes sense that if they're not getting enough of the major building blocks for the brain, that they may have some mental health issues. Which brings me to the concept of eating a vegan diet for young adults. Vegan is very healthy because they're mostly consuming the fruits and vegetables and all the important ingredients. But some research, and it's not only mine, but other researchers have also found a relationship between eating a vegan or vegetarian-like diet and mental distress in populations. And it was found, there's a big study that showed, I think it was like 80,000 people. I'm not 100% sure, but they looked at men, husbands of pregnant women. So it was a big study, but they interviewed the men, and so these were husbands of pregnant women, meaning young adults mostly. And they found that all those who reported eating a vegetarian diet had higher risk for mental health issues. So this brings me to what we found in our study, that younger adults need some high quality protein. And if they don't meet these demands, they may have higher risk for mental health or mental distress. For mature adults, we found that with age, there's a need or higher need to be consuming more the fruits and vegetables, because as we get older, there's an increased risk of inflammation in the brain. And then eating these antioxidants can reduce the impact of oxidation that comes from inflammation. And this is why we need antioxidants. We also found that with age, there's more sensitivity to caffeine, in a sense that anything that may increase the stress response or support the stress response may trigger mental health problem. We found it more in women than in men. We also found in young adults, whether men or women, that caffeine can also increase their risk. So in mature adults, women were more sensitive to caffeine. In younger adults, men and women are the same. And the reason, we looked into the reason, we found that in young adults, because they have the sex hormones. The sex hormones have to be metabolized in the liver the same way the caffeine has to be metabolized. So they compete for the same enzymes. So people who, so young adults, people who take hormone replacement or maybe on birth control, they may be more sensitive to caffeine than other people.
Interesting.
Really interesting. Well, thank you so much for spending the time and joining us. Can you just share with our listeners where they can find more about your research online?
I think the easier way is just to Google my name and write mental health, mental distress. There are many articles written by news agency. I think these are easier to understand, but if they want to read my own research, they can go to Google Scholar and research my name, and then they find my publications there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Begdache. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us today and this discussion regarding nutrition and mental health.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
And thank you so much to our listeners for tuning into this week's episode of The Barrier Breakdown. We hope you all stay safe and healthy. Take care.
Thank you for listening to The Barrier Breakdown, Disrupting Mental Health. Listeners can find all of our episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. For more information and to learn about upcoming continuing education events, check out our website, cbicenterforeducation.com, our Facebook pages, Cognitive Behavior Institute and CBI Center for Education, as well as our Instagram at Cognitive Behavior Institute and our Twitter at CBI_Pittsburgh. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We hope you'll tune in for another guest next week.